Thanks for joining us on another busy night of all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. Another loaded show for you tonight. We are one-on-one with Senator Alyssa Slotkin hours after she gave her first floor speech. We're talking with her and Troy Mayor Ethan Baker about something that doesn't get a lot of coverage because people say it's not sexy, but it probably should get some coverage. It's called working together, bipartisanship. We're going to check into that in just a moment here. We're also talking about an issue that impacts far too many Americans, mental illness. And advocates say, you know what, there's simply not enough help for people who need it the most. And lawmakers aren't doing enough. That's what one attorney thinks, and he's joining us on The Pulse. And with that attorney, clinical psychologist Dr. Rose Moten, about what needs to be done right now. We'll get to all of that in just a few minutes here, but right now we want to pick up the pace and fly through some of the big stories making news in the world of politics. We begin with, you guessed it, Jeffrey Epstein and that investigation. We do have new developments to tell you about tonight. The Wall Street Journal reporting that Attorney General Pam Bondi told President Trump his name was mentioned multiple times in the Epstein files. We should point out the Journal says many other high-profile people were also in the files, and being named does not mean that there was necessarily any wrongdoing. Bondi reportedly told the president this back in May. You'll remember within the last few weeks, the DOJ said there was no client list and no further documents would be released in this case. This comes the same day as a Florida judge rejects the Trump administration's request to unseal grand jury transcripts, saying it didn't meet any of the extraordinary exceptions to make them public. And a House subcommittee voted to subpoena the DOJ for files in this case. They also subpoenaed Epstein's former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is convicted of helping Epstein abuse underage girls. Turn now to some business news in the trade war, where President Trump announced a deal with Japan. This is pretty big news. He announced a 15% tax on goods imported from the country, down from 25%. Trump says Japan will announce $550 billion into the U.S. economy will be coming in, and it will open its own economy to American cars and rice. It's not clear if cars built in Japan will still face the higher rate that President Trump imposed on that industry. And a quick note about the race for Senate. West Michigan Congressman Bill Huizenga announced today he won't run for the upper chamber. He said he talked with his family and President Trump before making the decision and will announce his future plans later this year. His decision leaves former Congressman Mike Rogers as the only Republican left in the race on that side of the ticket. Turning now to the mental health crisis. It's something that impacts so many Americans, and there's now a question of how to make sure people who need the help the most get it. And guess what? Some are pointing the finger to Lansing and Washington, demanding that they make it a priority. Here now to talk about what they're seeing and what they think needs to be done, clinical psychologist Dr. Rose Moten and attorney Eli Muad, both of them taking a seat here on the set of The Pulse. And we, of course, thank you for joining us here. This is an important one, and one that I don't understand, to be quite frank with you. How is it that we're allowing people who, if we talk about physical health, you wouldn't allow someone to be bleeding on the streets to be let go without care. But mentally, we have a different standard. Now, I want to begin with you, Eli.
Okay.
You called me and told me something needs to be done because you know people who are literally on the streets or in their homes, and they're literally losing their faculties. Talk about that.
All right, real quick. I'll say this and I'll say it again. Number one terrorism in this country, in all of our states, is mental health. All right? That's number one. Number two, when one of my clients is found incompetent and cannot testify because the forensic center near Ann Arbor says they're incompetent, they're supposed to go to the forensic center and there and to see if they can get them to be competent to testify. Well, here's what's going on that nobody knows about. I have clients that are either walking around without getting any treatment because there's no beds available, or I have a mother that calls me every day about her son in the Ingham County Jail who doesn't belong there, but because there's no beds available and it's now going on 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 months, they can't take that person from the local jail, which is they're not competent to take care of mental health, get him into this facility to try to make him competent. The bed delays are extraordinary.
So you're telling me that there are people who need mental health care who are instead spending time in jail because there aren't beds available?
Absolutely. I have another client that is free on bond, but his mental faculties aren't even there. He thinks he's someone else. I don't know what's going to happen with him being out in the public.
So Dr. Rose Moten, right now, look, every single person who's watching this has a choice. They can pick up the phone, check their phone, get an email address, talk to the lawmakers. What would you say right now lawmakers in Lansing and in Washington have to do to address this?
We have to make this a priority. Right now we have a crisis response kind of reaction to mental health, where the reaction or the services come after there's been some headline, some major headline or some tragedy. We have to adopt more of a preventative approach, and that's not what is happening. When you speak of even the mental health issue in our juvenile justice system, we know 70% of the population in the juvenile justice system has a diagnosable mental illness. And the time between symptoms and first treatment, not just for youth, just across the board, is 11 years, believe it or not.
11 years.
11 years.
So let's talk about what it is that we
The
are
average
addressing.
time, I'll say
average
that,
time,
yes.
right. What we are addressing and what we aren't. Eli, I think it's interesting. We are addressing those who have gone to a place where literally they're posing a threat to themselves or others. We're addressing that by way of making room for them. But there are so many others out there who are on the verge of that, right? And that's what you're concerned about.
I would say in my 36, going on 37 years of practice, I believe that my clients in mental health, I probably are well over 60, 70%. And I'm not talking about teenagers or 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds. Mental health is everywhere, and there is no money or not enough money coming in from the feds and the state to take care of the problem.
Dr. Moten, when you hear that sentence from Eli, not enough money coming from the feds or from Lansing, this show is a political talk show. We want to activate people in a place where they can actually make a difference. What can people do?
And maybe that's what makes the difference when you talk dollars and cents, right? If you talk about not just the human, just morality of it, but if you talk about the money loss, like for every $1 that's spent on mental health services, there's $4 of productivity that's returned back to the economy for that person. It saves money to be preventative, to not be reactive to this.
We have some questions from our viewers. We always say this show is about you, and that's what we mean when we show you questions like Carrie's question, who's coming in right now, saying how to get access services if you are working but aren't covered by employer and make too much for Medicaid. This is an important subject. Dr. Moten, what do you think?
There's some community mental health services. Even if you're not covered by your employer, many employers have what's called employee assistance programs where you can get a certain amount of sessions for free. But I would also, there's help out there. It's about finding it. But we also know access doesn't mean availability. And that's the really sad part about it, because there's long wait lists. There's not enough providers. There's not enough when you talk about the serious mental health issues, such as like major depression, bipolar, schizophrenia. There's really a lack of individuals, medical professionals, psychiatrists, nurse practitioners that can prescribe the psychiatric meds that are needed.
Eli, I want you to take this next question.
Sure.
Lee Williams, Joy, from a legal standpoint, asking a very important question. How can you get help for someone over 18 that refuses?
Well, so that's where you have to go to probate court. The doctor will tell you there is a relief, but it's not a quick relief.
No.
And it takes time because the probate courts assign a guardian ad litem to go see the person, make a report, and say, well, this person's got to be put into a psychiatric center. It is not a quick process. And in the meantime, the person who has psychiatric problems would either go out and commit a crime or hurt themselves or worse, death.
Does it surprise you right now that Lansing, we talk a lot about fixing the damn roads. We talk a lot about fixing a lot of things. I mean, that's all great, but if we're not fixing the most basic, my wife is a mental health therapist.
Yes.
We talked about this. We're not taking
Right.
care of the most important thing in the world, which is our functioning. Is that a problem in our society,
It's
Dr.
a
Moten?
huge problem. That's the foundation of our society. I'm a firm believer that if we can really get a handle on this and do what's needed, be preventative and get the treatment and educate individual, we will see a lot of these other social ills that really plague us kind of diminish tremendously.
Eli?
Yeah, I completely agree with her. On substance abuse issues, I see people going in for 3 days, maybe 30 days. It's not enough.
No.
The doctor will agree with me. I see it in my criminal practice. Oh, okay, I went in, came out, and they go right back into substance abuse, 6 months to a year maybe. But there's just not enough money being poured into substance abuse rehabilitation, mental health rehabilitation, and the poor forensic center, they're tapped out.
Listen, one thing that we're going to do on this program is to contact the people who are in charge. And so what we're going to do is talk to our lawmakers, Speaker Matt Hall, Representatives Noah Arbit, others out there, Jim Runstead, others who are very important people in our state. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. you got to care about this and want to reach out to them. And when we do, I hope you'll come back and maybe we can do a chat.
Anytime. I hope they call you, the doctor, or me.
Well, we know you're watching, so if you're watching, call us. Let's figure something out because we can work together. Eli, Dr. Moten, good to see you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Well, up next, she gave her first speech on the Senate floor. Now she's joining the Pulse. We're talking with Senator Alyssa Slotkin one-on-one about her message from Michigan and how she's working with Republicans to get things done. Next. Welcome back to The Pulse, where we talk all things people, power, and politics. And today was a big day for Michigan and for Senator Alyssa Slotkin as she took to the Senate floor for her maiden speech to talk to the whole country about the needs of the state of Michigan. And Senator Slotkin, this is the only nightly political show in Detroit and in the state. And so we thank you for joining us on The Pulse here tonight on such an important day.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you said something very interesting in your speech. You said, and this is an interesting question for anyone at home right now. If you ask yourself, what's the #1 most existential threat right now to the United States of America? People at home, ask yourself what that would be. Senator Alyssa Slotkin says it is a shrinking middle class. That is the biggest threat right now. Why do you say that?
I mean, I think that America is built on the American dream and this very, very simple idea that if you work hard and you play by the rules, you should do well and your kids should do better. And I think for a lot of Michiganders, a lot of people around the country, they are questioning whether that still holds. And to me, you know, in a very diverse place like our state, in a diverse place like our country, when people can't achieve what their parents achieved, when they can't get ahead from just honest work, when they have to have 3 jobs in order to cover the bills, they're angry, right? You can feel that anger. I feel it. So to me, what happens when people feel angry is that they look for someone to blame. And again, a lot of the anger that you see in our politics is reflective of that. So Michigan invented the middle class. We literally invented that idea that you could work in an auto plant and afford the car you were building. We got to have a strong middle class. We got to have an American dream that works. So to me, that is the #1 issue for the country, but also for my time as a senator.
You know, I find it interesting because you were elected into office at the same time that President Donald Trump won Michigan. And it spoke to kind of that disenfranchised middle class group out there that said, you know what, these politicians aren't working for me. And politics as usual isn't working for me. And so many Democrats, 20,000 Detroiters voted for Donald Trump, the president, because they felt like maybe he knew what they were thinking about and talking about. Are Democrats learning from that? And have you taken a note from that page as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to miss the message of last November. I think it's also hard to miss the message since then, right? Even in like something like these New York City elections for mayor, people want their government to do the basics, the fundamentals. They want to be able to lower the cost of living and save more every month. They want a good job, one job with good benefits where they can save every month. They want a house or be on the path to homeownership, healthcare that doesn't make you go bankrupt. We need energy. We need a clean environment for our kids, and we need to be safe and secure. So it's kind of like we've lost the ability as a government to do the fundamentals. And no one cares if you have a bunch of trick plays if you can't get your fundamentals right.
Let's talk about the temperament of the country right now. People talk about the anger that everyone is feeling right now. And I thought that was interesting that you talked about that. And you said that how did we get to this angry place? And you asked the question and you answered it in your mind. I wanted to ask you what responsibility Democrats have, because we have seen the finger blamed to Trump and MAGA supporters. But what responsibility do Democrats and Democratic leaders have to get it right when it comes to the temperature of politics in our country?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a responsibility wherever possible to search for common ground. Now, you know, for me as a Michigander, that's easy, right? It's like that's how my dad was a Republican. My mom was a Democrat. Like we come from a place where you have to find common ground every single day in your community with your neighbors. But a lot of my peers, both Democrats and Republicans, come from a state that's either one or the other. Very Democratic, very Republican. So they're not forced to compromise and they don't think about that. So you got to look for common ground. you also have to stand up for your values, right? And I'm not gonna give up on that just to sort of make something work and everyone be happy and hold hands. But I guess the question is, when you wake up in the morning, are you looking for common ground? And Democrats, as much as anyone, need to be doing that. And if that's your starting place, I think that's a lot healthier of a way to go.
Are you doing that right now? And let me ask you specifically, as you are a senator representing all of us, what are you doing right now to work with Republicans to make sure that this country moves forward and not backwards?
Yeah, I mean, so every single day, like I'm on the Veterans Affairs Committee, I'm on the Armed Services Committee, agriculture. Those are actually pretty bipartisan committees. When the cameras aren't on and people aren't performing, it's amazing how much work you can actually get done. People act like adults. And so there's still a ton of bills that we are working on every single day that are bipartisan. I mean, look, Michiganders know that I have my own mind. I'm independently minded. This spring, I took my first vote where I was the one Democrat to vote with the Republicans on no EV mandate, right? I said in my campaign I was not going to support an electric vehicle mandate. Sure. California had a mandate. There was a lot of pressure on me from my side of the aisle not to do that. But you know what? I understand where Michigan is. And to me, I don't care what you drive. I just want to build the next generation of vehicles. So I think it's about perspective. And what was really nice about my maiden speech today, because this is kind of a Senate tradition, members of the Senate come to listen to the freshmen give their maiden speech. I was really glad to see Republicans also showed up. And Senator Katie Britt was there. She and I are the two youngest women in the Senate. And she came. She couldn't have been nicer, getting my staff onto the floor so they could witness the speech. Like, that's the kind of stuff. Wow. You gotta use that as a hopeful moment. And we need those moments now.
We need a hell of a lot more of those moments, Senator Slotkin, because the people who voted for you, I can tell you right now, you know this, you've taken the temperature. They're sick and tired of the bickering. And I don't care if it's sexy or not, the responsibility is on our shoulders, too, in the media to bring the stories of bipartisanship and bills that are working well together. You're working on that. We're going to keep covering it. So have your team and you tell us when that's working well, and we'll cover it right here.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you. Great
to see you. Senator Alyssa Slotkin, congratulations on your maiden speech on the Senate floor here today.
Thanks.
Good to see you. We'll be right back when we'll be talking to a Republican Mayor, Ethan Baker, about his thoughts on the big, beautiful bill. What are some of the things in there that he worries about and that he thinks will work well for Michigan? Next on The Pulse. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show. This is The Pulse. Joining us now with the Republican perspective, Troy Mayor Ethan Baker. Mayor Baker actually worked in his post-presidency, President Reagan and his wife, Nancy Reagan, as well. So you bring some really interesting perspective. You're not old enough, but somehow from the 80s, 90s, and beyond. But you really are a political observer and also, of course, a participant. But when you look at, Senator Alyssa Slotkin making that big speech today, she said one thing that really stood out to me here tonight on The Pulse, and that was that we don't cover enough of the fact that Republicans and Democrats work well together pretty darn often, but it doesn't catch the headlines. How problematic is that for Americans?
Well, I think it's hugely problematic, and it evidenced by the fact that the government still is working and functioning, which tells you that somewhere somebody's working together to make sure the lights stay on and things happen, right? So there is evidence that people do work together, regardless of how you think they get there. But I'm also really taken aback by the fact that it's hurting the mental health of our society, right? And so all we're seeing on social media or on the news often is the negative stuff, is the sound bites that are tearing people apart and making people think that there's just screaming heads at each other all the time in Washington or in Lansing. And I personally know that's not the case, and I think you know that's not the case, but the majority of Americans don't realize that, and it's really scary because it is hurting the mental health of all of our American citizens.
Well, you're a parent and you're also a political observer. And when you see what happens on social media, let's just be frank and pull the curtain out and take a look at what's going on here. Social media giants profit on algorithms that pit people against each other. So if you put out an article that has even false information in it, they'll fact check it, but they'll have people argue about it. That in itself is a model by which people make money. Problem, right?
Right. this society is driven by money. We know that. A lot of stuff is done for profit, which is a reality of our system. But I can't tell you, at least once a day, I'm having to correct one of my teenagers on something they've seen come across their phone about what's really happening. Most recently, the president has this disease with his veins, right? TikTok was telling them that he was going to die in 2 to 3 days. They believe it because they're teenagers who don't have a fact checker other than their dad. But it's just fascinating to me, and that's just one little example of what's happening. And imagine multiplying that times the millions of people in our society and all the people who don't have a dad fact checker or don't have a lot of interaction with other people. They're sitting home alone, they're retirees, they're looking at their computers for the social interaction. They're getting a lot of bad information, and it's hurting them in our society.
I always tell people, look, whatever your news choice is, we hope it's us, but the bottom line is there's an app for that. You can literally download an app and check news any day of the week and not have to Google it, but download the app, look at your newscasts, understand what's going on. It is important. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the bipartisanship and the things that need to happen. Now, when we look at the big, beautiful bill, as a Republican, who's the mayor of the city, what are your biggest concerns about some of the things that are in there that could affect your people, your constituents?
Sure. Well, certainly you've heard the Democrats screaming about them over the past several months, and rightly so. They're playing to their base and they're playing to their caucus. And you've heard the Republicans trumpeting some of the good things in there, including the tax cuts. And I've talked about that here. But there are, of course, concerns. When you hear about the potential for millions of people losing their health coverage and what that could mean, rural hospitals closing. There's no rural hospitals in Troy that are going to close. We don't have rural hospitals. But there's people's families who are affected by all those closures. I worry about those SNAP benefits for the children in our city who do depend on some subsidized lunches and breakfast through the school system that may be at risk.
What can you tell us about that? Because we know the bill doesn't go into effect for a little while, but some parts of it do go into effect. Yeah. Are we seeing immediate needs that you think need to be addressed?
Well, no, I haven't seen anything come across my desk yet. And certainly we know most of the detrimental aspects of this bill, if you want to call them that. And don't get me wrong, there are good things about rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. And I do think there's always room for that. But some of the fear does come to fruition that we hear about in some of these cuts, they're not going to really happen for another year or two for the most part. So I'm very, very hopeful, Roop, that people in Lansing, people in Washington, D.C. are going to recognize those as time goes by a little bit and make some fixes. I think we're going to have to, otherwise there's just too much risk.
But do you really think that people who fall between the cracks or fall in the cracks will actually have the recourse to have their voices heard loudly enough to get the fix they need?
No, that's a really good question. It's funny you brought it up. I was on a panel this morning for Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and one of the people in the audience asked me that question, asked, it's great that, we can call our senators and members of Congress, and we're talking to a mayor right now, but the people that are hurt, they're the ones that actually need to be communicating their needs because they're much more believable. They tell their own story way better than anybody else can, but they don't often have the time or the resources or the ability to even reach out to their representatives. And so there's a disconnect there that we're going to really have to work at. And I know there's really good members of Congress, good members in our state legislature on both sides of the aisle that will come together to find a fix if it's truly necessary.
But if a fix is necessary, the onus then falls on the state's budget, right? To kind of fill in those gaps. Is that something that you have faith in?
It's difficult. Our state budget, just like our local budgets, there's very little discretionary spending that can be moved around for anything that's such of this nature. So it's going to take a fix from Washington, I think, to actually supplement some of that. Certainly the state government's going to do what they can to try to fill some holes and do some patches, but I think it's almost impossible for them to cover a big gap like that right up front.
Well, Mayor Ethan Baker, a Republican, but a nonpartisan mayor in your role. You always bring diplomacy and decency here to this set. And we always thank you for that because certainly we don't see a heck of a lot of that on social media, as we kind of talked about. So, Mayor Ethan Baker, good to see you. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse.
You too. Thanks, Roop.
That is The Pulse for tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Roop Raj. As always, it was good to be with you.